I speak to you today about a matter of utmost importance to our country, our future, and the future of our children. It is time to admit that Brexit has been a major economic and political disaster for the United Kingdom. It is time to start the process of re-establishing our membership of the European Union. This is the only feasible way of starting to undo the appalling damage that Brexit has done to all of us. Like most people, I was willing to give it a go, provided the grown-ups were negotiating with our best interests at heart. But they have not done this. As a result, every opinion poll indicates that rejoining is now the will of the majority of British people. I spoke up and fought to protect our parliamentary sovereignty and democracy. I gave politicians the tools to do their job in implementing the referendum in a legal and considered manner. I was hopeful that that difficult task ahead of our elected representatives would be a logical and sensible plan. They would put forward a strategy that would keep us a strong nation. But the various ministers and prime ministers could only trot out empty sound bites. I am once again speaking up. The UK voted to leave the EU on the 23rd of June 2016, but only after a campaign of fear and misinformation, headed up by a man who has been found guilty now of lying to the House of Commons, an outright, shameless and blatant liar. That was about the lockdown parties. But Boris Johnson also lied and misled the entire nation about Brexit. People were told that leaving the EU would mean vastly more money for the NHS, lower immigration, and a stronger economy. But not one of those promises has been delivered. And now even senior Brexiteers are quoted as saying, Brexit has been a failure. In fact, since the UK left the EU, our economic record has been embarrassingly weak. And that is not mainly the result of COVID and the illegal invasion of the Ukraine, since every country has suffered from those effects. Our economy has slowed, with the OECD estimating that Britain's GDP will fall by 0.2% in 2023, making us the second worst performer in the G20 countries after Russia. On trade, barriers between the UK and EU are likely to deepen despite the Windsor Agreement. The loss of frictionless dynamic trading inevitably means additional costs for businesses on both sides. The plain truth is that life as a third country outside the EU is tough, not just for business. Think about ongoing friction over e-passport gates, queues at Dover, access to the Horizon programme, EU clearing, and rules of origin. When Britain legally left the European Union on the 31st of January 2020, Boris Johnson, the then Prime Minister, proclaimed that Britain would rediscover the muscles that we have not used for decades. What has happened? Instead, we have witnessed decline and damage. Brexit is not the only reason behind our country's economic underperformance, but it is a unique factor. But trade is not the only Brexit casualty. Post-Brexit investment levels are now over 30% lower than pre-referendum levels, due to the significant uncertainty that we now face. Compare that to the EU, with business investment currently 2% higher than its pre-2016 trend. A study by the Centre for European Reform estimated that had we stayed in the EU, tax revenues would have been about 40 billion higher than today. On the NHS and care sector, they are facing severe funding crises, but they are also now facing severe people crises. Their need to secure medical supplies, access to new drugs, and a stable, well-qualified clinical workforce is more pressured than ever. Everywhere you look, we need people. Be it doctors, nurses, dentists, anaesthetists, porters, carers, or fruit pickers, farm workers, abattoir workers, sewage workers, plumbers, builders, teachers, researchers, chefs, waiting staff, everywhere. In fact, the only place where there seems to be no people shortage is in the House of Lords. Every day, we are seeing and hearing of more damage, of our talented young people leaving our great country, crises in almost every public service. I admit that I had thought that the renegotiation clauses in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, would limit the damage, would put us on a better path. But the overwhelming, growing evidence is that whilst renegotiation might bring some relief to some workers, some businesses, the overall impact will be small. There are therefore two facts that we must focus on. One, by definition, trade tends to be greater with neighbors than distant cousins. It may be good to have a free trade deal with Australia, say, but its impact is marginal, and the environmental damage great. It is a one-sided deal. It does not help our economy or businesses. The government's own data shows that they expect the trade deal with Australia to add just 0.02% to the UK's economy over 15 years. Again, the government's own economic analysis of the benefits of us joining the CPTPP bloc is hugely underwhelming. They estimate a gain to our GDP of just 0.08%. Secondly, there could be some efforts to simplify custom procedures, but the EU has been crystal clear. Without the UK participating in the single market and custom union, there will always be barriers to trade. There will always be burdens and costly red tape for businesses in the UK. And the truth is that the single market and custom union option would make us, the UK, rule takers, with no voice and no vote. We are so much better than that. But our country has to decide. If we are to move on from a high-tax, low-growth economy, failing public services, something must change, and it must change as soon as possible. The evidence of the damage to almost every sector and every part of our country is clear. The question is, what are we waiting for? If politicians can change their minds, why can't we, the people? There are only three choices that we need to carefully and caringly look at. Do we renegotiate small sectoral changes? Do we join the single market and customs union, but toff our cap and just accept existing and future rules and regulations? Or do we renew our membership of the EU and be at the top table? Become once again a springboard to the EU, attracting inward investment and businesses to the UK. People who want to come here because they love our country, our legal institutions, our education, and our great sense of humor. To me, that is the only choice. It has been 7 long years since the referendum vote, but there is still no more of a plan today or strategy than there was then. Surely it would be better to have certainty, to have hope, to have happiness as we look forward to a future that is sustainable. Companies want to be able to compete with their European neighbors to work on a level playing field. We want protection for our rivers and beaches so they are no longer full of sewage. In an increasingly interconnected world, challenges are coming to us from all directions. AI, climate change, the threat of pandemics in flora and fauna, global health crises, issues all without borders. Surely the choice is that we combat them together. I am aware the critics will say that rejoining the EU would compromise our national sovereignty. But it is important to recognize that sovereignty is not a zero-sum game. The reason there was no plan is that it was impossible to come up with a plan that could possibly come near to the special deal we had with the EU. The public can now see through the tissues of lies that they were told. But it was not their fault. Everybody makes mistakes, but the biggest mistakes are from those who refuse to admit their mistakes and learn from them. Now, enough is enough. We need to rejoin the EU. Together, we can both be stronger. But rejoining the EU would also reaffirm our commitment to the principles of unity, peace, and shared prosperity. Rather than leaving chaos to our children and grandchildren, we need to act now. Rejoining the EU would send a powerful message to the world that the UK is ready to use our powerful voice once again, to act with responsibility, compassion, and integrity. The True and Fair Party believes it is time to pull the ripcord, to stop the national decline. I urge the leaders of all parties to join us on the path to rejoining the EU, to put our country back on track. The truth is the benefits of rejoining the EU far outweigh the costs. Britain belongs at that top table. The majority of British people, especially our young people, believe it was an acute mistake to leave. Our friends and partners abroad all want us back in the EU, with the only countries objecting being countries who would deny us our freedoms and our values and our principles, countries like Russia, who want us to stay out. It has been 7 long years, but after being lied to and misled, we want to re-establish our membership of the EU. We want to rejoin the EU. We must rejoin the EU. It is time to put the interests of our country first.